Champions League draw takes centre stage as we look ahead to an intriguing tie away to Linfield. Friday night's disappointment against Shamrock Rovers was eased slightly by a solid performance and victory 3 days later away to St. Pat's. And the women's team were washed out on Saturday. And we also take a deep dive into the mailbox all on this week's show. Donny, a very good evening. How has your long weekend been in the football sense?
How you doing, Andy? May we live in interesting times. That's what they say, right? And certainly no lack of talking points or topics of interest. Yeah, it's been mad whirlwind day today, particularly with the European thing. Not a huge amount of work done in the offices of Shelbourne fans and beyond, I'm sure. But thank God for last night's result, and we dodged a sporting bullet by avoiding a big fish in the European draw as well. So I'm sure we'll unpack that. But yeah, a better finish to the long weekend than a start, that's for sure, Andy.
Lots to get through. Well, Donny, last week I asked you, would you be packing away your sombrero and Speedos? Would it be fair to say they won't be needed up in Belfast? But you never know. Donny, all eyes were on the draw in Neon earlier today. As the draw went on, I don't think I was the only one getting a little bit nervy that Steaua Bucharest, as they're known, were still in the draw. But Linfield, there are our opponents. A fair draw in terms of both sides would be happy enough with that, Donny. Is that would you agree?
I think so, yeah, Andy. I mean, myself and others had spent the morning on Sky Scanner looking at the options when we knew it was either back to Gibraltar. Some of the ones that we discussed on here with Lee Daly came up. Obviously, we had the Gibraltar, we had Breidablik in Iceland, and we had Linfield. But there was two wild cards in there that we weren't expecting, which of course was Kosovo, which we didn't think regionally would factor in, no more so than Romania and the might of Steaua Bucharest. So. Just from a logistics point of view, they were two ones that you would have rather avoided. And then obviously as the draw began to unfold, and the options were narrowing and narrowing, it came down between, the very known quantity in Linfield and the might of a sort of reformed Steaua Bucharest in Romania. So I had looked at Skyscanner, as I said, and it's a long old trek across to Romania. The flights would have had you coming in after midnight as well, and they play in the National Stadium out of there. I said it to somebody that we would have been like about half a dozen flies in an empty swimming pool at the 54,000 capacity stadium or something like that. So yeah, Linfield, I think they'd be happy, as you suggest, Andy, with getting us as well. I think both sides will be pleased with the draw. The fact, again, we were used to doing, say, Derry away and whatnot. Obviously, great memories of the end of last year, 1st of November. And this is a similar but a little neater of a journey in many respects. So, certainly far better than the option of going to Romania. So. That remains to be seen how it'll pan out. Obviously, it's by no means a gimme, but I think both teams will feel they're really in with a chance of progressing.
Linfield are no mugs at European level. As anyone who knows the Northern Irish Football League, Linfield are the sort of the kings. They're the regular winners, even though that title has been shared in recent years. They relatively cruised to the title in 2025 there just a couple of weeks ago, Donny. I think they finished 22, 23 points ahead of their nearest rival. They have a very, very experienced squad. Now, someone that League of Ireland fans and Shells fans will probably know the name is Chris Shields. He had a great career in the League of Ireland. Donny, you've been doing some homework. Mr. Shields, we believe, is suspended for the first leg. Is that correct?
That is correct. And as any good student will tell you, copying off other people's homework is perfectly acceptable. In this case, I've copied from, but if you're going to do it from a good student, and Dan McDonnell obviously is is the best on the beat, and it was he who pointed out that Chris Shields was suspended for this tie. So, he would have been a known quantity as well to us, and we'll have to play him in one of the games, presumably in the second leg up there, and I'm sure he'd be chomping at the bit to have an impact on events. But if you would have a choice as to choose whether you'd face Chris Shields in their team twice or once, I'm sure we'd rather have him missing for one of the games. So no harm there. Obviously, we'll be missing Sean Gannon, as has long since been flagged, but I think perhaps, as alluded to way back when at the fans forum, a change of shape was sort of deemed the way of coping with that back then. But we've sort of thrown the four at the back out the window at this stage now long ago, and it's five at the back anyway. And I think we're hopefully, knock on wood, we're reasonably covered for Sean in the first leg anyway when it comes up.
Chris Shields, as I said, well-known player at Linfield. They also have Joel Cooper, who's been in great goal-scoring form this year, Matthew Fitzpatrick. They also have very experienced players like they got Stephen Fallon, Cameron Ballantyne, and Jamie Mulgrew, a former Northern Ireland international, still going strong at 39. As I said, Donny, they'll be quietly confident, even though they're just coming back into their pre-season. They haven't been out of action that long. More than likely, they've probably had 2 or 3 weeks rest. But as professional players, they'll be hitting the ground and getting back into the mode of the mindset now. The first leg is in Talca. How crucial is that going to be to not do anything silly, to try and, do you go do you go all out to try and take a lead up to Windsor Park, or do you just try and be sensible, manage your way through it?
On some level, Andy, I suppose if we were going to more far-flung destinations, such as the aforementioned Stoya, you'd probably feel you'd definitely need to take at least a goal lead with you. I don't think if teams were level, or even if we had to claw back a small deficit, you wouldn't feel that's beyond you just going up the road. But from a sort of momentum standpoint, I feel like if you're going to catch a team cold in any sense, and as you said, we've had our own break recently that we've discussed, and there's elements of fatigue obviously with the Monday Fridays, which we've also discussed, which they might be looking at and thinking, maybe this Shells team's a little leggy, a little overcooked perhaps, and they might fancy it. But if we're going to catch them cold, it's got to be in Talca with the crowd up close to them, making them feel as intimidated as possible. I'm trying to get the jump on them, much in the same way that this time last year, Andy, we got the jump on St. Joseph's, and ultimately looked at that early goal. It proved to be just as crucial as the others because there was only one goal in it over 2 legs. So it could well be the same this time round, where one goal is ultimately crucial.
The sides I think last met, Donny, I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong in this, Atlantic Cup final, I think it was 2005, a night I'd rather forget. But the meeting of these two sides from sort of north and south does bring an element of extra eyes on it, so to speak. Do you think that both sides of supporters and so on will try and represent their clubs in the best possible way? Maybe I'm being hopeful.
I'm sure some will, Andy. Look, this did come up on this pod when we discuss. This is why I would have plumbed for going to Wales rather than up to the north, because it does sort of tend to encourage others who wouldn't be Shells fans maybe or League of Ireland fans to glom on just to get some vindictiveness and sectarianism out of their system. And from what I've heard from some Shamrock Rovers fans who were up there last year against Larne, and no more so than we've seen when we've gone to Derry at times, you get people from the area who have no particular interest in in the football club either who will use it as an opportunity to bring some sort of violence and spiteful hatred to the door of whichever team is travelling up from the south. So I don't like it, and the sort of slurs and are commonplace in these fixtures, and that would be around, say, that the Old Firm and so on in Scotland don't do anything for me. I've said it before on here. That's nothing new, but I know that, as I said, other people's mileage will vary on that, and I'm not going to tell people how they should behave. But I think you might have to have a strong skin, a thick skin, whether you're on the field or whether it's in the stand. You might be hearing some vocabulary that otherwise wouldn't crop up on a normal fixture. But hopefully that's not the story of things. I thought the way that the Zurich Ultras were policed in the European competition last year was very sensible. They brought great flair and atmosphere to Tolka Park in a very memorable 0-0 draw. That it's a shame that game hadn't happened first. Actually, it's a shame that the tie was effectively dead and buried. But it was a very memorable day for both teams. And if sense could prevail, then you'd like to think that it could be repeated for this. I'm sure the PSNI have had many opportunities to sort of run the rule over fixtures like this in the recent past. So I think we'll be fine. But I wouldn't be too precious. And if your ears are easily offended, I'd perhaps maybe watch it on the telly.
Well, let's hope for the best. The accountants in Tolka Park, Donny, will they be happy with this when you consider the logistics? There's no need for flights, less travel time, I would imagine, and that will save the club a few bob. But in terms of, as you said, I assume Duff will sort of use it like a Derry away sort of mindset. He may or may not adopt the approach of staying overnight somewhere. That would be his call closer to the time. But the use of Tolka Park, I've seen a couple of questions coming into us saying, is there any case at all to maybe even consider moving this to the Aviva Stadium, or is that very, very premature for a first round tie?
I think there's arguments to be made for sure, Andy. And on the first point, I definitely think that the club have to be satisfied from a fiscal perspective here, insofar as their the original outlay that they might have been expected to have to stump up would be significantly less. I know that when we went up to Derry on the 1st of November, it was put to the team whether they would like to stay the night before or whether they would choose to travel on the day, and it was put to a vote from what I believe. And because we had stayed in a hotel ahead of the cup game up there and didn't have a good performance or a good result, I think the team almost unanimously voted to travel up on the day, and we know what happened there. So I wouldn't be shocked to see that repeated. With a financial view, obviously, Andy, this is the sort of the thin end of the wedge, in the sense that I know, regardless of result, we're guaranteed at least one more European tie, but this offers us 3 more bites, 6 matches, 3 ties, with the win to progress. So that's huge. The type of money that we made last year would be dwarfed by that, particularly as we'd go through the front door, so to speak, with the Champions Path. So I think there's certainly an argument that could be made around the Aviva Stadium. I wouldn't like the idea of Lansdowne, of Tala, although the size would be more achievable. I think going to a direct rival's ground when you could have it in your own, I don't think the optics there are great. And from a Shells fan's perspective, I think you'd feel a bit uneasy about that. It wouldn't sit right with me anyway. The Aviva would be different, but I think we've kind of had our fingers burned a little bit recently with the very vitriolic reaction to the idea that the Shamrock Rovers game from just the other day could potentially have gone there. Whether people jumped the gun on that or not is kind of immaterial, but people were very, very unified in their defiance against that. So I think what we probably have to do is try and use Talca, limited as it may be, and it's a shame. Obviously, we'd be missing the use of the Ballybock and the new terraces on the riverside as well. The capacity last year, I think, was around 3,600 for the Joseph's game. So it's not great. You'd like more, but for one game, that could give us, a real advantage in the tie. You would hope. I think it's probably short term pain for a long term game when you're talking about finances.
So, Shell CEO Mossy Quinn and Luke Byrne, technical director, were in Neon today. I hope they had a lovely trip. I imagine right now, Donny, as we record on Tuesday night, they are probably negotiating and arranging the fixtures. So, as I said, Tuesday night. Now, anyone listening to this later on will probably know the fixtures and so on and the dates. But we're only 3 weeks away, so it's going to come quite quickly. First tie will be on July 8th or 9th, which is a Tuesday or Wednesday, and then the following week will be the 15th or 16th, Tuesday, Wednesday. The days and dates will be confirmed, hopefully, in the next 24 hours or so. So, Donny, we did have reports that our man on the ground, Mr. Lee Daly, was seen pacing up and down Terminal 2 in Dublin earlier with a ticket for Bucharest in one hand and one for Kosovo in the other. But thankfully, there's no need for Lee to do any research for us there.
I spoke to him this morning once that group came out. It was like Christmas Eve, really, wasn't it? I didn't sleep great, and I know I'm not the only one, like a fucking idiot, like a kid. But still, I woke up very, very early, waiting for the group to be released. And then when we saw, there was ones that we expected to see, as we've touched on, and then those two wildcards, I was like, oh Jesus Christ, this wasn't even in the maybe pile. So Lee had a little chuckle, but I still think, look, he got a solid 3 out of 5, 60%. So we'll give him a C grade.
That's fair enough
for the predictions. Could do better.
Could do better. But listen, Lee, you're always welcome here. So, Donny, let's leave that for now. We shall know more in the next 24 hours or so. The next round of Europe we will know tomorrow, Wednesday. So I'm sure, again, by the time some people listen to this will be old news. You'll know the plans for the next couple of weeks and months, hopefully. Fingers crossed, though. I think the majority of people will be happy with the draw against Linfield. And don't worry, we'll be getting back to that in much more detail in the next week or two. So, Donny, we had a huge washout and talk on Saturday for the women's game. But before that, on Friday night, in the same sort of mode, it was a little bit of a damp squib. The Shamrock Rovers were in town. First game back after the mid-season break. Packed Talca Park. Lovely evening. And Shells failed to deliver.
Yeah, failure to launch, really, wasn't it? We discussed on here before, Andy, what were we expecting, what were we hoping for? And I think both of us came down on the side that it was more, the result would be what it would be, but we were hoping for some green shoots, I think we said. A sign that we were going in the right direction with the view to these, the European ties and whatnot. And unfortunately, we didn't really get any of that. We almost nicked a result. I think I'd said a score draw, and we were about 10 minutes or so away from that, regardless of whether we deserved it or not, and I don't believe that we did. But it was very disappointing. I think that the thing that most disappointed me, again, was we'd been told that we had a full, clean bill of health for the first time all season, possibly Duff was suggesting maybe even since the beginning of his tenure. And then I thought our approach was very strange. I thought our 11 was very strange. I was a bit disheartened that's if that's everybody fit and available, that's the team that took the field, and more so than that's the performance that they gave. It was it was beyond underwhelming, and it was a bit concerning. Now there were some green shoots second half. You'd argue for about 15 minutes or so, maybe slightly more. Harry Wood's introduction sparked a bit of attacking flair and threat. It was a shame we had to wait that long to see him, I thought. But yeah, on the whole, I don't think we deserved anything. We came close to maybe getting something, but I thought we defended our goal for the two goals abysmally. I thought our shape was very peculiar. Um, I don't think we gave ourselves the best platform to try and get a result from that game. It smacked a little bit of overthinking. I mentioned it to someone on the night, that a little bit of a sort of a Pep Guardiola in the Champions League vibe of maybe overthinking the opposition instead of putting a team out to sort of nullify your opposition or to deal with their strongest points rather than maybe accentuating your own strongest points. Tyreek doing a man marking job on Jack Byrne would be an example of that. Something we haven't seen in any Damien Duff team that I can recall in such an overt way, where it was almost like Gaelic games. He was going up and standing next to him. If Jack Byrne was going over to get a drink of water, he was only short of jogging over and standing and watching him drink out of the bottle. You know what I mean? So, not that I'd blame Tyreek, but again, this is the detail he was given. It allowed. I thought Healy ended up having a very good game in the middle for them, while we were busy worried about Jack Byrne. So yeah, an insipid first half. Harry Wood's 70th minute introduction sparked us for a little bit. I don't know why we waited that long to see him. I would have thought that himself and Ali Coote, who we'll move on to talk about now, I'm sure, from last night's game in Richmond Park, must have been sitting on the bench looking out, thinking, "What the hell have I done? What am I doing here?" And there was a couple of very, very poor performances from individuals thrown in as well. So it was a real shit sandwich of an evening. It was very, very little redeeming qualities, I'm afraid, Andy.
Yeah, we love our Friday Mondays, Tony. So in some ways we had a chance to get Friday night out of our system. You beat me to the question regarding Tyreek Wilson there. We had a question in from Stephen asking it's a long worded question, but basically he's asking what the hell was going on there. I think you sort of touched on it, Tony. It's not something we've seen before, and I think if everyone's honest, they'll hold up their hands and say it didn't work. But look, anyway, so last night, Monday evening, another lovely evening in Dublin. I didn't quite. I wasn't there now, but I was watching on LOI TV. You were there, I believe, Johnny, in the midst of the Richmond Park uh, pig pen down the corner. How was the evening overall?
I'm not sure about your intel there, Andy. You might have to copy someone's homework a little bit better, because
Oh goodness!
I too was stuck listening to the dulcet tones of our former manager and cab driver, Johnny.
Well,
But
that's put me in my place.
yeah, I know. Yeah, the tickets went on sale while I was indisposed at training, and when I came out, they were sold out. Plus, I don't Monday nights in Inchicore. Don't grab me, but it was actually I was sort of glad in a way to see how it played out from a different perspective. Again, I took far too many notes and just sort of, I thought particularly first half it was a very enjoyable watch. It was a tonic for the shit sandwich from Friday. It was a more delectable offer than what we'd seen. But I thought first half we were very good, and you got to see the shape, and us trying something that did work. Whereas you had obviously Tyreek's thing, and look, I wouldn't be blaming Tyreek whatsoever for the role he was asked to do on Friday last. That the job he did nullified from play Jack Byrne to a reasonable extent. It was kind of I don't know if it was a great idea just to begin with. It doesn't mean that he didn't execute it. But gone to the Pats game, we kept a hold of the ball. The thing that really seemed to trouble Pats was Harry Wood's movement. He was the one. He kind of had a free role almost, where he was coming wide. He was looking for overloads in the middle to create a +1. And literally for 45 minutes, they couldn't live with him. They couldn't. The defenders were very unsure as to whether they should follow him out. I know, as a recently former defender myself, that's what, when you see someone going into that kind of, no, it's beyond where you feel comfortable following a player, because you're going to leave a gap. But then that's exactly what Harry wanted to create. He wanted to go out beyond the threshold of where the defender is comfortable, get in a pocket where he's now effectively unmarked. He can turn, and the player that was supposed to be marking someone else or closing someone else down now has two players on his plate to worry about. So he got a lot of 1-2s out under the Carmack side. He was able to get on the ball with a bit more time, playing balls into the channel that almost had Sean Boyd in a couple of times. He was involved in every good thing that we did. So it was unusual for me, actually. I was surprised that it took Stephen Kenny an entire 45 minutes. He had to get his players into the dressing room before he addressed it. I imagine if that was us, particularly with Duff's recent penchant for whipping players at 30 minutes or whenever he feels, you could have seen, the triple change that Pats made at halftime happen sooner for them, because they really had no answer. Connor Kearns in goal had almost nothing to do the first half. We had a huge amount of possession. We were comfortable with it, and obviously after the goal comes, we don't create a huge amount, but we were very comfortable and very assured in possession. And then halftime came and went, and we basically had a different football match in the second half, Andy, where none of the things I just said happened again.
And why was that, Tony? Is that just a natural sort of flow of a game? Stephen Kenny would have given his fellas a good old earful at half time, saying, look, we need to up the levels here dramatically, because Shells definitely did control a lot in the first half. It's the first time in a long time we've seen Paddy Barrett, Sam Bone as a partnership at the back. It looked a lot more like Shells of old, even just seeing those faces there. We can see the value of having Mark Coyle back in the centre of the park, particularly in the first half. He controlled a lot of the play. But was it almost inevitable that the second half was going to be a little bit of a backs to the wall? It wasn't like the Alamo now, but it was. We certainly sort of decided, look, we're just going to park the bus here for 25 odd minutes and try and hit them on the break.
It might not have been the Alamo. That ended in a in a one-sided massacre, if I recall. But it was Alamo adjacent, in that there wasn't a whole amount coming back the other way. What they did, they had Keane up front, and for the first half he was largely ineffective because he was very isolated, and we were just playing around him at the back, and he was sort of chasing shadows. And they did press us very high in the first half, and said, okay, well, if you think you're good enough, then play around us. But we did. We did put a few early passes out over the sideline, but on the whole, I thought our passing accuracy in the first half was very good, and a lot of the stuff that we did very well was one touch, which is, if you're a man light in an area and the rest of the other team are able to hit crisp one touch passes, you don't really have any chance of getting the ball back. But second half, they put Mason Mealy on up top as well. They went a bit more direct. They ran at us a bit more. They sort of took the middle area of the field out of the equation a bit more, and Simon Power was doing a lot of attacking up the wings, and they were able to go back to front a bit quicker. And yeah, I suppose I kind of would have expected, as you suggested there, Andy, that there would have been an element of like, okay, batten down the hatches. They're obviously going to come out of the traps. They've probably gotten a rocket at halftime. It was 2 or 3 changes all at once. I'm sure, in front of their home fans, they would have been given in no uncertain terms, a dressing down to go out and show the fans that you're actually up for this game. Unfortunately for us, it wasn't just a window of 10 minutes or even 15 minutes. For my money, it was the entire half. and it led to, it was a very difficult watch. I know from speaking to people at the game as well. It was watching through your through your fingers kind of stuff at times. Um, the positives of that, as you suggested, Sam Bone, Cam, and Paddy Barrett as the three starting centre backs, three big strong guys, won a lot of ball in the air, cleared their lines, ably, a lot of corners. They had to deal with a lot of frees into the box. They had to deal with, and they did. So to keep that clean sheet was huge. But it was a bit concerning that we weren't able to really threaten in any way. Up the other end, I was looking at the stats after the game, and then we would have been well on top, obviously, at half time. And percentage wise, possession was fine. They had 9 corners, we had 0. They had 13 shots in the game, we had 3. We had 1 shot on target in the whole game. That was the goal, which obviously suggests from the goal on, which was early, we didn't have another shot on target. They had 6. Their goalkeeper as well got one obviously late. But that, this game was about more than statistics and whatever. Obviously, there's a hugely passionate end to the match, and the scenes were great, and all the rest of it. But behind that, it could have, we could have easily been looking at a draw. Had one of those efforts gone in, we defended very manfully, and that was good to see. But the reality as well that in nearly 200 minutes of football between Monday and Friday, we've had 1 shot on target in between both games, because we had none on Friday in front of our home fans at Talca. So, we've gone from a situation at the start of the season where Meepo was getting a shot on target inside the first millisecond of the matches, to a point now where we've played 2 Dublin derbies back to back. And we've got 1 shot on target to show for 2 games now. Luckily, that 1 shot has led to 3 points. But I'd be slightly wary of looking too deeply into it and saying that everything's all right in the kitchen now. I think we still have a lot of things to work on, frankly.
Is this probably a building job towards the European game now, Donny? Because we mentioned this last week, that really is probably the biggest. It probably is the biggest game of the season now, because people may agree or disagree. I've said myself, I think the league is gone, and I think after last Friday night, for us, the league is most certainly gone, barring an incredible turnaround, which simply won't happen. Damien Duff, I think, is a huge fan of our show, Donny, probably because of yourself. But I wonder, was he listening last week? Because we mentioned Harry Wood, and according to my notes, Harry Wood finished the game last night.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
You are correct. Yeah, he didn't know what to be doing with himself, because we made changes obviously on 70 minutes, and he was jogging over, being like, "Oh well, here we go again," and he had to be told, "No, not this time." He probably was like, "Oh Jesus, another 20 minutes. That's a hard slog." And sort of ironically, I thought he was our best player once again. I mean, I thought he was absolutely unplayable first half. Now, that's partly tactical as well, in the sense that we had the smarts to use him as the extra man and the man to target, and to try and get on the ball. But then he's got to deliver once he's given that responsibility. And I thought he was absolutely brilliant. And although I think none of we made a lot of changes, none of them contributed super handsomely as the game went on, just because it became a bit more and more clear that we were going to have to hang on for this nil, or else, because we weren't going to score up the other end. But Harry ended up having to do, a lot of clearances from inside his own third. But even in a defensive job, I thought he was superb. I know there's been a lot of praise coming in for Sam Bone as well, who probably overall, I would say, had one of his better games for Shells. Let's hope he can continue to be available to be picked. But yeah, I was super impressed again with Harry, and 90 minutes like hen's teeth for him this season. So, and himself and Ali Koud obviously showing that they can play on the same field at the same time, and of course both were involved in the goal. So perhaps we can maybe go some ways to dispelling any myth that the two of those guys can't um, play on the same team at the same time with it and give good results, because that was the best Shells we've seen in a long time in that first half.
Harry Wood could be, and hopefully he will be, very influential in this European tie, Dunny. Does the fact that Shells, the way they set up, people may disagree with me in this, but they seem to me to have that sort of cup. They're like almost like a cup team, give very, very little away, and in a one-off game, they can take on anyone. Is that perhaps what we might see in the next couple of games building up to Linfield? That the gaffer is not going to change too much. He's probably the only thing he probably would change is the fact that we had one shot in over nearly 3 hours of football, maybe more, which is concerning. He tried out all different combinations on Friday and last night, and between them all, the only shot on target was from little Ali Kout. So, is our cup run um, something that we could start to get excited about? And then also on the European side, could we be very well set up to take on the Linfield team in that sense?
Yeah, I see what you're driving at there. It does kind of feel like we're entering into a period of the season where cup ties obviously are going to be taking on significance, because I think most people leaving Talca Park last Friday, and he would have reluctantly agreed with you had they not already done so about the league. But there are two other opportunities to get into Europe for next year, and then obviously we're in a position where we can make inroads into Europe in a way hitherto not done since 2004. So, and obviously these are going to be two-legged ties in Europe, and then you're coming home to play Fairview down in Limerick and see where that takes us. I was thinking about this earlier and just writing about fractions and small margins and tight ropes that we were walking this season. Like, I think we'd all agree that it's been a less than stellar season. It's been very bitty. It's been very almost not quite sort of performances, as much bad as there has been good oftentimes. But other than the 2-0 reversal up in Derry, I think any loss we've had has only been by the odd goal, and like when we're winning games, it's it's by the odd goal. So like even when we're performing sub optimally, which has been basically most of the season, we've still managed to hang in games where if we've lost, it's been 1-0 or it's been 2-1. So that would say to me that these fractions are so small that like a small uptick in form could really yield a serious benefit for us here entering this period. So like I wouldn't be abandoning hope by any means. The fact that our injury list is somewhat cleared up now, I imagine we'll be seeing a couple of new bodies in the building pretty shortly. Were they to hit, if anyone of them were to hit the ground running, that's a new dynamic into the bargain as well. It's not going to take a lot, as much as we might seem to be complaining or, not getting carried away with performances and whatnot. It is still very, very close to being results almost, every week. So whether it's Linfield, whether it's in the Cup, and frankly, now that 3 points last night puts us right back in the mix for anywhere from second to fourth. Either second, third, fourth could be two of them will be. Obviously the fourth place could be good enough for Europe next year. So that's for me what we got to keep shooting for. We mentioned that Pats, if you're going to finish ahead of Pats, and we have Derry on Friday, if we finish ahead of Derry, we'll be a long way to being in those European positions. So there's absolutely tons to play for, and as I said, the margins are very small, and if we can improve by about 5%, that could be enough to suddenly start looking up and going on a bit of an unbeaten run.
So this Friday, as mentioned, Derry City are in Talca Park, And we have another Monday game next week, Tony, away to Waterford for those who wish to travel out to the sunny southeast. So it's a busy patch of games before the European stuff gets underway. Donny, so let's leave the men's stuff there. Donny, something extra time.ie, Donny. We got a mention on the extra time.ie podcast review, which is very kind of them. So
Yeah.
we're in the same company as all the big hitters. Almost, and we got to mention Donny. It was nice of them to include us in that
Yeah.
list, wasn't it?
Yeah, we got to mention. I'm not sure how much of the show they've actually listened to, but um, we are a known quantity to some degree, it would seem. But sure, we're only upstarts, so um, it is nice to get a mention from them for sure.
Yep, episode 22. So we're motoring along nicely. And on that note, if anyone would like to get in touch with us, you have all the details in the show notes. You can email us, do all the social media, send us in your comments. We have a lot to get through. Any questions you'd like us to address, all on the show notes, and we're open 24/7. So, Donny, last week we did a huge preview of the biggest game of the season in the women's Premier Division. At Lone Town, the champions were coming to Talca until they weren't. We woke up on Saturday morning and the heavens had opened and Talca Park had turned into the River Talca. It was very disappointing, but what can you do?
It was mad, yeah, and the weather as much as sport itself, right? It's quite appropriate, sort of a metaphor, really, isn't it? In that we went from feeling glum in the sun on Friday night, and then I was absolutely bereft then on Saturday, waking up to that because I really felt I needed the shot in the arm of having another game that I was very hyped up about. That I thought, I was looking forward to being back in Talca and with a smile on my face and maybe just exercising the demons of the Friday and just being like, well, okay, we've got a team here that's absolutely in the driving seat, pushing for the league, and yeah, for it not to happen and then to have to dwell on the previous evening didn't feel great. But then, much like today, I went out for a little run before we jumped on the pod here, Andy, and it's absolutely splitting the stones again outside. And we've just beaten Pats, and we've got a good draw in Europe, and
Sounds
the sun,
good, yeah.
the sun will rise again. So it's very up and down. I felt bad for the club, for the girls, for the team, for everybody, because I know a lot of effort had gone in behind the scenes to try and push the match, as is only correct. Obviously, the team would have been absolutely amped up for this. This was one that we'd earmarked from a good distance out for the significance of it. That we'd done our sort of preamble. The team had prepared through the All Ireland Cup games and whatnot, and then it's a hurry up and wait. So mad to see the scenes and the images and so on coming from Talca, Andy. I was saying to someone that if they'd thrown some rubber ducks out onto the field and taken a photograph, they would have been in for a shout at the sports photo of the year award, because I believe when Talca burst its banks years ago, that's what somebody did down in front of Section E, and it won sports photograph of the year. But just mad to see that, having been there only a few hours previous. Just unbelievable the change in just
Yeah.
a few hours and the impact that it had on the pitch. I mean, there's been talk, we spoke about it on here early in the season, Andy, about what happened at Tala with the late axing of the game against Cork City there for their men's team. But I mean, there was absolutely no way on earth that this game could have gone ahead. It was beyond unplayable. So I wouldn't want to be in the shoes of whomever's job it is to get that playable again for this coming Friday, because it's a hell of a job.
Yeah, a lot of water to move. In a funny way, Donny, now, does that kicking that fixture down the road by a few weeks, possibly even by a month or two, because the calendar is quite packed up. Shells are away to Sligo on Saturday. I believe the following 2 Saturdays are cups in Talca. They take on Treaty and Galway in both respective cups. And then, of course, you have your league fixtures, which are already scheduled. I don't know how they're going to squeeze this one in. Are we going to see a midweek game? Are we going to see an off weekend, a rest weekend? They're going to have to squeeze it in somehow. But that does crank up not the pressure, but you still have 2 Shelburne Athlone games to play now in a much tighter window. It actually makes things even more exciting, in my opinion.
Yeah, it does, and certainly from the league's perspective, that could be something that they could really get behind to push, the race for the title. If both teams continue to win their other league games, of course, and it becomes very much a 2-horse race, then you'll have 2 6-pointers coming up in quick succession, as you said. The one thing you would hope from our perspective is that Owen Weir and the team remain as focused on the league games as well, that you can't it has to have been a disappointment to not have played that game. I know they would have been up for it terribly, so to have the disappointment of it not happening, it doesn't mean you can't afford to lose focus. And this game against Sligo now, back in the league, we went there very recently in the All-Ireland Cup and won convincingly. You can't take your eye off the ball, because those 3 points are going to matter when it comes to whenever these games against Athlone will be, because you can't afford to let the gap's only at 1 right now, and if anyone slips up in the meantime, let it be them, let it not be us. I'm sure they'll be aware of that, but sometimes just as a human, you can't, when you've focused so much on one thing being decisive, and then that gets postponed or kicked down the road, it's not easy always to refocus on something that you're expected inherently to go and win. So a bit of mental prep maybe to be done to keep us right for that, but it's certainly going to be very exciting when the fixture does arise. I just hope that maybe we've managed to reel them even in by then, or certainly that the gap isn't any further apart than we currently are.
Exciting times ahead. So, yeah, as you said, Sligo, Shells are away to Sligo on Saturday. The men's team take on Derry in Talca on Friday, and then they travel to Waterford Monday evening. So, Donny, I think we're all shelled out now after a very busy long weekend. The emotions of today, the European draw, the highs and lows, what could have been, and then finally we know our fate for the next couple of weeks anyway.
Yeah, it's what it's all about, Andy. I was looking through recently enough, was sent some videos of 2019 the bar after the last game in 2019. I was looking back at the From the Ashes book from last season and so on, and just the emotions that you go through following the football club, and it's really for times like this that you've gone through it all, you know what I mean, to have the excited sort of giddiness that was so prevalent amongst our supporters today. This is the payoff for sticking with a team, for going week after week, for experiencing the lows, so that you can wake up an hour and a half before your alarm and see who you might have gotten in the regionalized group, and then it came down to a flip of a coin today between fucking Stoya Bucharest or Linfield, and I'm sure I wasn't the only one roaring inappropriately in their workplace when it wasn't Stoya, so. This is what it's all about, and look to get an opportunity to be in the hat again, to go forward, hopefully, and have multiple ties in Europe this year would be absolutely brilliant. And as we said last week, and sort of touched on again today, that there's so many fronts in the league and in the cup, and obviously in Europe, that are worth fighting on. Again, that the season is absolutely still alive with possibilities, and no more so than to get us back to this position next year, whether it be in the Champions League or whether it be in another European competition, just to be in the hat and to be involved and to be excited nervous, giddy, and all of the emotions that come with being in a team or following a team that have gotten to this stage. So long may it continue. It was a long time away, and it's certainly it's a good time to be a Red.
What a time to be a Red, Dunny. Thanks for that. So that's it. Dunny and I are going to take a day or two off, recharge, and back for Derry on Friday, and for a very, very busy few weeks ahead. Tony, thanks again for all your wonderful knowledge and thoughts and comments.
Thanks, Andy.
And we shall speak to everyone next week. Have a good week ahead. We'll speak to you soon.